Welcome to Next in Leadership, the interview. I have Umair here, and I've known Umair for quite a few years here. So I asked him to be part of this here, and I was thoroughly impressed when I first met him on his ability to lead self, others, and organization. I'm excited to hear his journey. And so, as you know, with this leadership, Next in Leadership interview, it's really just an opportunity to take the skills that you're hearing that others have used and possibly apply them to your life. And so, hopefully, this is a valuable interview for you as well. So, Umair, thank you for joining the Next in Leadership, the interview, and obviously go ahead and introduce yourself and then share a little bit the start of your leadership journey and really where you first saw some elements of leadership when you were young that has began this course for you.
Thank you, Reed. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to you. And yes, my relationship with you and partnership has really helped me grow my leadership as well. But going back to the early stages, I think the first time I really felt the leader in me come out was as an early engineer coming out of college, being a software developer, where I was always curious on why am I building what I'm building.
Mm,
Engineers, you give them problem, they'll go solve the problem, but I was more interested in where is the problem coming from, who is
mm.
asking this, and what I'm building, how's it going to be used and impact them. So I always, rather than focus on, okay, I've done my job, thank you very much, there you go, what's the next task, I would always ask my stakeholders, my counterparts, to say, what is the problem that you are trying to solve? And I
Mm.
wanted them to tell me their problem in a layman's term rather than technical terms, because I wanted to find the best solution for them. And that intrigue kept taking me going more and more towards bigger problems, business problems, rather than just trying to solve technical problems. And that's where I felt like I want to be in a non-developer role and more of a leadership role where I can understand people's problems, help them solve their problem, but not just myself, help a larger team, people around me, other developers, other people in my context, being a software developer, how I can use my interest and skill sets. Not every developer is interested. I have these conversations with my peers. Not every developer is interested in finding that what the problem is. They want to technically solve it the best way possible. And I was probably not the best in solving that. I was more interested in understanding the problem and helping take a bigger picture and helping use the best resources to solve it. And I might not be the best developer, but I felt I understood the bigger picture much better. And that's where it started.
So early leadership traits you identified in yourself, and there's probably listeners that are here are saying, I had a curiosity that was beyond my peers. It was not about what I was doing, it's about the impact it had,
Hmm.
right? And those are two things that are leadership principles, right? Is saying my curiosity is greater than my peers, and I want to see the impact, not do the task. And so then obviously you saw that, hey, you know what? I'm viewing this differently than those around me. And it's interesting for me as I do these interviews. Everybody, there's traits that are inherent to a leader that people identify at different stages and places in their lives, but they always drive them back to leadership. In your case, it was an advanced curiosity that was beyond your peers. And some people may be sitting in an office right now or some location saying, you know what, I am way more curious and no one cares but me. And those are just early leadership traits that force us down that path, right? And then the second part of that is saying it's not about a task, it's about why. If we can't get the why out of our mind, we should probably lean into leadership. And so that began your journey. And then the first ultimate step is you had to lead yourself well. I've watched over time that if people don't lead themselves well, they fail miserably at leading others. And so what, as you were early on in your leadership journey, that you began to develop principles that led yourself well? What are some techniques or tips that as an early self leader that you stepped in that really helped govern your time you led yourself?
I give a lot of credit back to my a lot of my leadership even today and skills that or principles that I follow to Amazon, my time at Amazon.
Mm,
Uh, that's where I found myself being mentored by some really good leaders as well, who I picked up from. But it was also a sense of ownership and responsibility.
mm.
I think that's the first time, and I was already 5 years into my career that I realized nobody else is going to care if I don't care myself.
Oh, wow.
So that was my first aha moment where I realized if nobody's even looking over my shoulder, what I'm doing, is this the right thing to do? Does this matter or not? And that was my first aha moment that really got myself to take responsibility and ownership for myself.
Yeah, I think there's two things that stand out to that. Number one is we all need someone to come alongside and mentor us, right? And that's the sentiment of this whole interview is saying, hey, the format, you can't go to these big organizations. Amazon now is more remote than it probably was at that time.
Mhm.
You had people you were in the room for. So how do you learn these traits? And next in leadership is an opportunity to do that, that you can kind of say, hey, I can learn from a person that worked at Amazon and learned from a mentor, and they can reshare that forward in this format. I think that's great. But I think also self-leadership is all about ownership, right? I think you hit the nail on the head, is like saying you were a follower, or
Yeah.
you're even victimized by the excuses until you take ownership, saying, hey, if I want my career to advance, if I want my life to advance, I have to take ownership of every element of that decision, good, bad, and indifferent. And so, and then really it was that initial self ownership. And so, what changed when you saw that there was a self ownership versus what you were doing the day before? So, when you before had that aha moment, you're like, I was just a job, whatever. But when you decided, I'm going to take ownership and have passion about that, how did you see that practically or tactically change on a daily basis when your viewpoint changed of, I own my job and my future, and no one's going to care as much as me? Practically, how did that look on your day to day?
Like I said, I got some. I was lucky to have a good mentor. They saw the results. It was obvious. The work that I was doing, just that the fact I may not have felt. I felt maybe I was doing the same work before as well, but the results showed differently. It
Mm,
showed my ownership. I didn't have to wait for somebody to tell me to execute a certain job, or did you think about all the scenarios when I gave you a business problem to solve? Did you think of all possible, repercussions that this could happen? Don't wait for somebody to tell me. Go ask a question. When I
mm,
started doing those things, it started showing up in my results in the job that I was doing. And it was as a technical program manager back in the Amazon day, and I didn't have any direct reports. I was actually, leading projects without having people reporting to me. So, and it's a big influence level role where without controlling the people that reported to you, you had to influence them and get them to do the right thing to deliver on your results. And as I started to deliver and I started to convince people without having direct supervisor ownership on them, it started to show in my results. I was able to deliver high value ROI projects.
mm.
And the next phase was, hey, this guy can do what we give him to do. Then I got elevated into an engineering manager role. So from a technical program manager, my first managerial role came where I started running in Amazon. It's called a two pizza team, where I was given a team of 4 developers that could be fed with 2 pizzas for dinner. That was where the concept came from. But I started having more ownership. So I had people reporting to me, bigger project. I had a full set of responsibilities that were well defined, and that was my first leadership, true leadership.
Yeah, so I think, what became obvious to your manager that led to you leading others was they saw your passion and commitment, right? It wasn't just a clock in, clock out, get paid and try to advance my career. It's that you truly cared, right? And one of the things I've always loved about you is your passion. I've met a lot of developers and they don't have as much overt passion as you have. Maybe they're a little, when you think of developers, you're thinking a dark room and probably working overnights, and sure they eat pizza, but I mean, you have more passion and dare I say personality than most developers. And so I think that might have been a trigger that turned that around and say, hey, I don't just have to be a coder. I can have that element of my natural personality there that would lead to leadership. And then I'm sure that early opportunity that as you were leading others, that's what that they noticed, saying, hey, let's have Umair infuse this passion and multiply his impact. And that's
Mhm.
when you started leading others. So now you began leading others with these four, the two pizza team here. And what are some early learnings that, that you were there, maybe as you're leading others, did they have that same passion? They have the same clarity or direction? And how did you adjust your techniques, that what was transferable from how you led self well, and what
Mhm.
worked and what didn't work? And what were some early learnings that you would advise someone else that might be leading a new team out of the gate?
I think that my biggest and the most stark learning was how you let go
Mm,
and trust others to do their job, and not be in there, looking over them all the time. Because if you are looking over their shoulder, you're not encouraging them to become the next leaders.
right.
And that was the single biggest, I think, learning for me that I did not have before. Because I was leading myself, I could control it. But having a team of people that you could now trust and say, I've given you your responsibilities and I've given you ownership. Now you got to go do it. How do I hold you accountable? Learning how to hold other people accountable without checking on them every 5 minutes was my single biggest learning. The other was being able to, be scale. How can I scale with now? I was one person before. Now I have a
Mhm.
team of 4 people. How can I scale and multiply? with this larger team, and that can multiply, with the larger teams as well. But those two, I would say, were the single biggest learning factors for me. Obviously, coming with people management as well.
Yeah.
You can teach people management and go through training courses and whatnot, but being a leader is not just about people management. It's about how you can enable them and hold them accountable while giving them the ownership.
Yeah, and I think early leaders that lead others fall in that same trap because we feel a sense of responsibility that our passion, in your case, and our focus is our responsibility. So I need to micromanage those others so that my brand as a leader is not adversely affected. And unfortunately, what you're doing is you're stifling them because you're doing it for the sake of now. What got me here, meaning perfection and the approach I'm taking, is not necessarily the working style of those people that are working for me. And so I have to elevate my mindset to objective and saying, hey, I've clarified, and as a leader now, I've clarified your role. Here's your program, and I will let you do your role. And then I'll check and have a check and balance a little bit later to make sure it's in alignment, as opposed to watching every line of code you're typing or whatever element that was otherwise there. And I think that's great. And then the other thing is, and I know this as a leader, as an organizational leader, is we don't want you to have 4 people to produce the same work of one person. We want you to produce the work of 10 people, right? I read this article one time and it said a single Clydesdale can pull like 8,000 pounds,
Yep.
but 2 Clydesdales can pull 20,000 pounds. And that's really what we want to be as leaders, is someone that multiplies that. And so that's really dividing the responsibilities around their strengths, right? And so, in a simplistic way, there might be someone that could code a user interface a lot faster than the back end, right? And if you
Mhm.
have the back end person working on a user interface, they might be slower. But if you have the user interface developer on one side and the back end developer on the other side, then they can pull that 20,000 pounds. And so, is that an example of how you structured scale, is understanding their unique skill set to accomplish a total objective?
Absolutely, and I would say like the best example is a project management role or product management role, right? So, like you said, even the front end and the UI, finding the right skill set for that person so they can produce a lot more. I could easily say, hey, front end guy, I need you to do back end as well. He'll probably figure it out, but he will probably take much longer to
Mhm.
contribute. Or rather, I can say, hey, you focus on what is you are best at
Right.
and do across multiple projects, multiple initiatives that we have. So you are producing at a higher efficiency, while the backend guy can do the same thing at higher efficiency. And somebody in like one of you is good at coordinating things with each other, right? And that person, why don't you wear a hat which is, and Amazon, we always said each person wears at least 4 hats, if not more, right? So yes, I might be the quote unquote the PM on the project for you, but you can be your own PMs. You don't have to wait for me to coordinate, to talk to the business stakeholders, to coordinate between you and the QA team and the production team when to launch this into production. Hey, you are a senior person, you have experience, you are a fresh guy, so lean on the senior person. And the senior person can be the one that wears the PM hat. That can be the person who can be the mini team leader and give them ownership, and they can make sure the overall success of the project is not impacted. And that's where the efficiency comes in. Otherwise, you are going down this train is going down this parallel path, and if they don't figure out a way to merge, they're going to collide. And
Right.
or maybe they will always stay on that parallel path and not find that proper meshing ground so that they become a longer train or something like that. So finding those skill sets with my team and team members and putting them in the right spot so that they can be efficient was the really multiplying factor, getting the output of 10 people from 4.
Yeah. So, what accelerated scale for you was to, one, identify the strengths of the individuals, define the roles and make sure they're in there, and then make them and help them collaborate with those other parties to truly accelerate it going forward. And that's how you learn to lead others. And so then that led to a natural next step, which is leading organizations. And so then, as you begin to lead a group of 4 to 6 or 8 people, then pretty soon you have greater success of scale and accelerant, and naturally that grows. So now talk about, kind of a step into a leading organizations, and maybe it was departments, multiple
Mhm.
departments or multiple initiatives at once, which are much more dynamic than a team with a single objective. And so what are some of the early learnings as you began to lead organizations and take a much broader role that changed from leading others to organizations? And what are some early learnings that you can share with others?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact is obviously the scale. You're not just dealing with one team or two team, but also I think it's a larger fit within the company's vision and culture. When you're leading with organization in a small team size, you can do what you want without impacting other people. But when
Mm,
you're leading organizations, people are looking up to you much more than in a team of 4 or 6 or 8 people. Now you have, multiple teams and stakeholders looking at you, other organizations looking at you, and the company's vision depending on you. So when you're leading the whole organization, for example, I'll go back to Groupon. I was Groupon Goods in charge of their entire technology platform. The whole goods organization is looking at me, but so is the Groupon leadership and vision from the scale side. Hey, this is goods business that is up and coming. How is that contributing towards our overall vision and growth targets? Are we meeting our top line targets? Are we meeting our bottom line targets? And those are business goals, whereas I'm the technology leader, but I
mhm.
have to fit my organization into a business vision and goal and target. That's when you are leading organization. You're no longer just, hey, this is my responsibility to develop technology or this feature. I am actually leading this organization to fit in the vision and culture of the company. And how am I contributing towards the growth of the company and vision of the company, and not just focus on my small team? And how can I instill that same behavior across my organization? So now it's an organization of 100 people, 150 people that I'm leading. How can that individual person in that 150 people organization do that exact same thing that I'm expecting from a team of 4 people? And how
Yeah.
do these as fitting in that bigger cog?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important point here that I think a lot of people struggle from that organizational or the or other step to organizational because it's way less about you, more about the direction of the organization. And
Mhm.
ultimately, as the conductor or as the leader of that, you're going to get the credit for it, but you are have to make sure that the train gets to its destination, right? I mean, if the
Mhm.
train doesn't get to the destination, they're going to come after the conductor.
Yep.
But if you're the conductor waving at all the kids going by and the train's going the wrong destination, you can have a lot of fun doing that and everything else, but you never got it there and you're not going to be in that role long term. And I think a lot of people think that, hey, wait a minute, everybody loved me when I was waving at them. But then ultimately you took for granted that you were just a person on the back of the train. And now you're the conductor at the front of it. And it's job one, get the destination. Job two, enjoy, make sure the passengers are having a great time. And I think sometimes you get lost thinking I was just waving at people before. Do I just wave stronger and faster and harder? And then that works. But no, it's really more about direction and vision.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key is hard to translate because what works in a small team where you have day-to-day interactions and communication with that small team, now it's less frequent. That you have 150 people, you can't talk to them all day. So you need to have a clear message about vision, a clear message about direction, and then ultimately have tasks aligned and assigned to all parties and make sure that it's staying on track going forward for sure. And that's great to see too, because especially and Groupon might be a good example of this. There's some fluidity of what is the market response when this is getting launched. I remember when Groupon launched, what's the market response and what do I need to adjust? And if you're just listening to your team and or you're just listening to your shareholders and not the general consumers, you might miss the boat. If you're just listening to consumers but you don't have your team behind you and the shareholders aren't behind you, you're going to miss the boat. So it's really looking at that organizational from a three kind of constituent group: the team you're leading,
Mhm.
the mission and vision the organization is trying to achieve, and the consumer's receptiveness of that. So maybe in an organization, how do you see those three things kind of coming together and to inform the decision versus that small team with an objective was defined by somebody else when you're leading others? Now, organizationally, you have to recognize these three different constituent groups: the ownership, the employees you're managing, and the customers. So how do you manage that dynamic as you're leading an organization?
Yeah, I think again going back to some of the learnings from Amazon, right? The customer first obsession. So that has to be the foundational layer.
Mm,
Uh, what are the customers that you are trying to serve? If you do not listen to them and make that your foundational layer to build on top of, the other two doesn't matter how
right.
happy they are, you're not going to be successful in what you're trying to do. So I think you have to make sure one of those three legs is given a higher weightage before while balancing the other two. And it's hard because if they're out of balance, you can be very customer obsessed, but if your team is not happy with you, if your
Right.
ownership is not happy with you, guess what? You're not able to deliver on the customer obsession that you're trying to obsess about. So I think the biggest learning, and that came from a lot of failures as well, unfortunately. And I take that in my leadership as very important. I don't take failure as, oh my God, I failed here. I take that as, hey, what's the learning from here? Because
Mhm.
that's where I've personally felt my growth has come. Is I don't regret any decision I've made. Um, it's always been, what was the learning in my decision? The
Mhm.
outcome is not in my control. The input is in my control. So going back to those, I think customer obsession first, making sure you're building the right thing for the right reasons, and then laying on top of that, what are my ownership goals? What is the leadership want, or the people at the executive level want for the company and the organization? Are we meeting our bottom line? Are we trying to are in a growth stage where we are trying to increase the top line? Are we trying to attract more customers? At the same time, while I'm trying to achieve balance between both customer obsession and the ownership goals, does my team understand why? The same why that I started with in my early leadership. I try to give that why to my team. Because unless I give them that why, I cannot get that buy in from them. And
Yeah.
it's not trying to get buy in because, oh, I'm your best friend that I'm trying to get buy in. Uh, you know me. I'm not the kind of guy people say, oh, Umair is my best friend. But they do see that Umair is that leader because I bring this transparency and visibility. Every person in my organization should always know why they're working on what they're
Mm.
working on and why this is important, not just in their project, in the overall scheme of the things for the entire company and organization. And how is this impacting my customers? Same why that I told you at the start of our conversation, why I got interested, even though a developer may not care, but I take it upon myself and my leaders to communicate that clearly. Like you said, that vision that the leader is always talking about, it's very important for me to give that visibility and say, this is how we tie in. The work that we are doing in ties in. Because if they're motivated and they see why they're working on, then I don't have to worry about looking over their shoulder. They'll go over and beyond to deliver on that customer obsession and that ownership objectives that we're going after.
I think two things stood out for me as you were communicating that. Number one is high level leaders, as you've been in many organizations, understand the clarity and vision and purpose and make sure everybody's aligned with that and they communicate it. But also, two, have a high degree of self assessment. And they're just not patting themselves on the back of success, but even in success, saying, what could I have still done better? Right? I could have done other things better. And what are those things? Or even in failure, it's self-assessment, saying, what did I do? And where's the decisions that were there? Because that's how we get better. And I think that's, again, the sentiment of Next in Leadership is saying, hey, at a high level, it's not because you do everything right? It's how do I self-assess on what I could have done better, and then quickly and readily apply that without ego and absent ego. And that's what I love working with you. There's no ego, even given the success you have as well. And it's always learning to do better. So where do you see, as we kind of wrap this up here, Umair, your next generation, the next journey of leadership? Where do you see this taking you next as you continue to learn and grow in your leadership journey?
I think I've been very successful when it comes to leading an organization, one organization. How do I scale when I try to give the same level of focus to multiple organizations?
Mm.
I think that's my next step in my own personal leadership growth is how can I make more organizational leaders who can do what I've been doing for one organization, but try to multiply that across multiple organizations, multiple initiatives. And that's something 'cause I'll give kudos. I learned from you for the last 3-4 years that we've been working together. How the same vision, how can I lay my vision out so clearly for my leaders, and then let my leaders take over to run that organization, but still be there for them to as a sounding board for those leaders to come back and ask questions, for them to learn, but let them run and grow and build those organizations in the same framework that if I were day to day 100% involved in that organization and growing it, how do I multiply it across multiple different varied organizations and businesses? And that's where the true entrepreneurial in me comes out, that I can have multiple entrepreneurial stuff working side by side.
Yeah, and I think wherever we're at, whether we're leading ourselves, others, or organizations, we're inherently the same person.
Mhm.
Personality and trait and wise, that's an entrepreneur in you, but we develop our skills. And as we develop our skills, then we can apply those in a much more broad sense. And so that's leading other organizations, but you're ultimately leading people. And as we elevate our leadership, we will be able to elevate others that we lead as well. But if we do not elevate our own leadership, that's the principle of this Next in Leadership, it's difficult for us to elevate the leadership journeys of others. And so thank you for sharing this week on the Next in Leadership, the interview. It's great insights as to, that passion. It was critical early as you developed self. And then as you began to lead others, you began to learn and assess their skills and abilities. And then you saw organizations managing those 3 different constituent groups and getting a structure and process together. I think there's some key takeaways that all of us can get from that and apply going forward. But thank you, Umair, for joining us on the Next in Leadership. And I'm excited to continue to partner with you on your leadership journey.
Absolutely, I appreciate it, and thank you so much for your time and leadership.